Who am I? My name is Schwoeffermann. Cultural and ethnic identity. I was born here in Portland by a Dominican mother and American father of Irish and German roots. I proudly embrace my heritage as a biracial man, as a black man. Um, I use he, him pronouns. I'm a devoted father of one boy. I'm also a passionate advocate for equity and social justice, dedicated to uplifting and empowering marginalized communities, particularly black individuals, immigrants, and those who are unhoused. While drawing from my own experiences, my identity, to drive meaningful change. My professional background, in a nutshell, I'm not going to get into my entire resume, but I have a huge emphasis in community engagement. I have extensive expertise in roles in the community engagement role, including at Washington County Housing Services, as a health equity organizer at the Urban League of Portland. Also worked at Unite Oregon, which is exciting because this workshop is for Unite Oregon. I'm currently an operations and policy analyst with the Oregon Health Authority. Some of the issue areas that I've really focused on and gained expertise in is cultural competency in the healthcare system, housing, especially finding housing for those who are unhoused, health equity. Of course, in health equity, it's such a broad term, but I have been involved in many different campaigns, whether it's data collection, whether it's tuition equity, whether it's finding, banning the box. I've always been focused on building my expertise and developing and implementing culturally responsive practices, finding housing solutions, and initiatives that will address systemic barriers and promote inclusivity. I've been focused on black and political organizing. I've been committed to building political strategies and organizing leadership development programs that empower black communities and promote progressive change. But before I begin, I want to take a moment to honor and express my deep appreciation for my elders and ancestors who have paved the way for me to be here today. Your wisdom and guidance, sacrifices have been instrumental in shaping my journey and the knowledge that I have gained over my 39 years. As I stated before, ready to share my understanding of the strategy chart, and I humbly ask you for your permission to proceed. I acknowledge that the insights I bring are a result of collective experiences and teachings passed down through generations. I merely am a vessel, seeking to share knowledge with the utmost respect and reverence for those who have come before me. With your blessing, I hope to impart the best of what I have learned while remaining open to wisdom and perspectives of those present. May our time together be fruitful exchange of ideas as we work towards a greater understanding of these valuable tools. Thank you for your presence and for allowing me the privilege to lead this workshop. Let us begin. All right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and start with a story. So gather round, because I'm here to tell you a little story about how a group dedicated to a group of dedicated advocates, community members, and community organizers came together to fight for health equity and cultural competency in Oregon. But before we dive into the battle for the HB 2611, let's set the stage. Back in 2011, a bill called SB 97 aimed to require cultural competency continuing education for health professionals. It was the first time in many communities of color had engaged in this state government on this issue, sharing powerful stories of their health disparities. But despite their efforts, SB 97 fell short. Undeterred, advocates spent the next year working with the Oregon Health Authority's Office of Equity and Inclusion to define cultural competency standards and explore training options. They were laying the groundwork for a fight ahead. Now, let's fast forward to 2013, And I know that's 11 years ago, but this is where the heart of the story started in 2013. The campaign for HB 2611, central to this effort, was a tool called the Strategy Chart, a simple but powerful framework that helps advocates map out their goals, identify key players, and develop a game plan for action. And in the fight for HB 2611, it made all the difference. First, the advocates got crystal clear on their goals, passing a law that would make cultural competency a priority for health professionals in Oregon. They knew that by improving providers' ability to understand and serve diverse communities, they could take a big step towards reducing health disparities. Next, they mapped out key players. They knew they needed a broad, diverse coalition to succeed, so they reached out to organizations representing communities of color, immigrants, refugees, and other affected groups. They built relationships with legislative champions like Senator Jackie Winters and Representative Alyssa Kenny-Geyer. And they enlisted the support of influential allies like the Oregon Medical Association and the Oregon Nurses Association. But the advocates also knew that to win, they needed more than just insider connections. They needed the power of the people. So they made a grassroots organization a cornerstone of their strategy. They trained dozens of community leaders to share their stories, collect endorsements, and mobilize their networks. They organized rallies, phone banks, and email campaigns to keep the pressure on lawmakers. Crucially, the coalition also recognized the opposition they would face. They anticipated the arguments that some might use against the bill, that it was unnecessary or too burdensome to providers. And they developed a plan to counter those arguments with data, expert testimony, and personal stories that highlighted the urgent need for change. Throughout the campaign, the strategy chart served as a roadmap, helping the coalition stay focused on focus and adaptive. When they encountered obstacles or opportunities, the group they regrouped and adjusted their tactics. They celebrated small victories along the way, using each win to build momentum and motivate for the next one. And in the end, their hard work and strategic savvy paid off. HB 2611 passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, a testimony to the power of a well-planned, well-executed grassroots campaign. But the story doesn't end there. The passage of HB 2611 in 2013 was a major milestone, but advocates knew it was just the beginning. In the years to follow, they stayed engaged, worked closely with the Oregon Health Authority and the Oregon licensing boards to implement the law and track its impact. When data showed that voluntary standards weren't enough to ensure widespread cultural competency training, they went back to the legislature in 2019 and they passed HB 2011, which requires health licensing boards to mandate cultural competence continue education. The bill, which affected in 2021, fulfills the original vision of the campaign to make cultural competence a fundamental standard of care for all health professionals in Oregon. As we reflect on this journey, it's clear that the fight for health equity is far from over. Systemic racism and discrimination continue to take a toll on health and well-being of marginalized communities. But the story of HB 2611, the subsequent efforts to strengthen it, give us a blueprint on how to fight back. By building diverse coalitions, centering the voices of those who are most effective, using smart strategic advocacy to drive lasting policy change. It's a reminder that no matter how entrenched the injustices we face may seem, progress is possible when we come together with a shared vision and commitment to hard work of organizing. So let's learn from this example of advocates who fought for cultural competence in Oregon. Let's take to heart let's take heart in their victory, large and small, and let's use the tools of strategic advocacy to keep bending the arc towards a moral universe, towards justice. One bill, one campaign, one community at a time. Because when we fight, we win. And when we win, we bring our world one step closer to equity and dignity that every human being deserves. Yay! Now let's move on to our the meat of our presentation, which is our power mapping charts. So what you will see here is a power mapping chart. We'll be going into much more detail today. So let's get into the just general power mapping. So this is a power mapping chart. This is what we use to build political power. Who holds the power to make change happen? This slide breaks it down for us. At the center is a goal. And so let me go to the next slide because this is the full chart. And I'm about to describe the entire chart right here. So at the center of this chart right here, you'll see these two lines, one going up, the most influential over this decision making, one going to the right, which is supporters, one in the middle, which is the goal, one down below, that's the least influential over the decision makers, and one to the left, which is the opposition. So let me describe each one. At the center, we have our goal. This is what we are fighting for, the change that we want to see in our community. Maybe it's the ending of discrimination and discriminatory housing policies. Maybe it's reforming a broken criminal justice system, or ensuring equal access to quality education for all. Whatever your goal is, it's the driving force behind your organizing effort. Now let's look at the arrows. So on one side is the most influential over decision maker. These are the folks who have the greatest sway over the people in power. They could be wealthy donors, high-profile community leaders, or well-connected organizations. For example, if we're trying to pass a police reform bill, the police union might be the most significant influence over the city council members who will vote on the legislation. On the other hand, on the other side, we have the least influential over decision makers. These are the people or groups who have the least ability to directly impact the decision-making process. They might be grassroots community organizations, individual activists, or concerned citizens. While they may not have a direct influence, their voice and actions can still make a difference by building public pressure and awareness. Next, we have supporters, or supports. These are our allies. These are individuals and groups who stand with us in our fight for justice. They could be progressive elected officials, community organizations, faith leaders, or other activists working towards similar goals. Building strong coalitions with our supporters is crucial to amplifying our message and creating a united front. And then finally, on the far left, we have opposers. These are the people and institutions who stand in the way of our goal. They might be politicians beholden to special interests, corporations prioritizing profits over people, or individuals who benefit from maintaining the status quo. It's important to identify and understand our opposition so that we can strategize on how to counter their influence and persuade them to change their stance. As an example, let's say our goal is to end school-to-prison pipelines in our community. The school board members and superintendents would likely have the most influence over the decision making. Our supporters would be parents, teachers unions, youth advocacy groups, and civil rights organizations. The opposition might include private prison, corporations, politicians who push for tough on crime policies, and school administrators who rely on punitive discipline practices. By mapping out these different actors and their levels of influence, we can develop a clear picture of the power dynamics at play and create a targeted strategy to achieve our goal. Power mapping is a crucial tool in the organizing toolbox. It helps us understand where to focus our efforts, who to build relationships with, and how to navigate the complex landscape of social change. All right, so we finished that slide. We're going to move to the next slide. This is where we'll discuss goals in more depth. So strategy chart goals. All right, let's break it down, the different types of goals that we have in our organizing work. First, we have long-term goals. This is the big picture, the ultimate vision we're working towards. It's the world we want to see, the systemic change we are fighting for. Think of it as a North Star guiding our efforts. For example, our long-term goal might be the dismantling of systemic racism in all its forms and create a truly equitable society where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Now, we know that achieving our long-term goal is a marathon, not a sprint. That's where our immediate goal comes in. This is a stepping stone in the path of our long-term vision. It's a significant milestone that moves us closer to the change we want to see. If our long-term goal is dismantling systemic racism, an intermediate goal could be passing a comprehensive police reform legislation at the state level or electing a progressive district attorney committed to ending mass incarceration. Finally, we have short-term goals. These are immediate, tangible objectives we're working towards in here and now. So they are building blocks. They're laying the foundation for our intermediate goals and our long-term goals. So short-term goals could include things like registering a certain number of voters before an upcoming election, organizing a rally to raise awareness about an issue, or successfully pressuring a local official to take a stand on a specific policy. Let's use an example of the movement for immigrant rights. The long-term goal is achieving a comprehensive immigration reform that provides a pathway to citizenship for all undocumented immigrants. An intermediate goal might be passing a state law that grants driver's license to undocumented individuals, which would improve their ability to work and participate in our society. A short-term goal could be mobilizing a certain number of community members to attend a rally outside the governor's office to demand the support for the driver's license bill. It's important to remember that these goals are not interconnected. They are interconnected. They're all interconnected. Our short-term goals lay the groundwork for the intermediate goals, which in turn brings us closer to achieving our long-term vision. By breaking down our goals into these different levels, we can create a roadmap for our organizing efforts and ensure that every action we take is strategic and purposeful. So when you're planning your next campaign or initiative, take the time to clearly define your goals at each level. Ask yourself, what is the world we ultimately are fighting for, and what is the key milestones that we need to hit along the way? And what are the intermediate concrete steps that we can take to get there? By answering these questions and aligning your goals at every level, you'll be well on your way to making real lasting change in your community and beyond. All right, let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about a target. So this is the person or entity with the power to give you what you want, the decision maker, who can make the goal a reality. Identifying and understanding your target is crucial to the success of your organizing effort. When you're filling out this section of your power map, Start with the basics: the target's name, the title, but don't stop there. You want to dig deeper and gather as much useful information as you can. This is where you put your detective hat on and start researching. First, find out who influences your target, who are the people or groups that have their ear, and it could be their advisors, their major donors, key constituents. For example, so if your target is a city council member, you might discover that they have a close ties to the Chamber of Commerce, or they rely heavily on their support in a particular neighborhood association. Next, look at any fun facts or interesting tidbits about your target. Maybe they have a favorite hobby or a personal connection to an issue you're working on. These details can help humanize your target and give you insights into what makes them tick. For instance, if you're advocating for a park funding and you learn that your target is an avid bird watcher, you might be able to use that knowledge to frame your message in a way that resonates with them. It's also important to know about decisions your target makes and who they're working closely with. So what committees do they serve on? What boards do they sit on? Who are their close allies or frequent collaborators? This information can help you identify potential pressure points and anticipate any obstacles or opposition you might face. If your target is an elected official, be sure to research their campaign funding. Who are their top donors? What interests do those donors represent? This can give you a sense of where your target's loyalties lie and what influences might be shaping their decisions. For example, let's say your target is a state senator who will be voting on a bill to increase funding for the public schools. Your research reveals that they have a close tie to a charter school lobby and have been receiving significant campaign contributions from the pro-charter organization. This information helps you anticipate their stance on an issue and develop a strategy to counter the opposition's influence. Remember, knowledge is power. The more you know about your target, the better equipped you'll be to persuade them and take action on your goals. So don't be afraid to dig deeper and get creative on your research. Talk to people who know your target, scour their social media profiles, and look for any statements or voting records that can give you insight into their priorities and decision-making processes. By taking the time to fully understand your target, you'll be able to craft a compelling message, develop a strategy that puts pressure on them where it counts, and who knows, you might even find an unexpected ally or opportunity for collaboration along the way. All right, so next slide. We're going to talk about the organizational considerations. We're going to dive deep into this, so let's go ahead and start. This is where we take a much harder look at our own movement or organization, and we assess what we've got to work with, what we need, and what might hold us back. First up, let's talk about the resources we have. This is everything that we can bring to the table to help us achieve our goal. It could be people power, like a dedicated group of volunteers or a board base of community support. It might be a financial resource like a grant that we received from a successful fundraising campaign, or it could be strategic assets like relationships with key allies or access to media outlets. For example, if we're organizing a campaign to improve public transportation in our city, our resources might include a coalition of community groups who have pledged their support, a team of experienced organizers on their staff, a database of thousands of residents who have signed a petition calling for a better bus service. Next, we need to be honest about the resources that we still need to win. This is where we identify any gaps in our own capacity or support that we need to fill in order to achieve our goal. It could be anything from needing more funding to hire additional staff to needing more research to bolster our case, then needing more training, or even needing more training to build our skills in a particular area. So our public transportation campaign example, we might determine that we need to raise an additional $50,000 to fund a robust media campaign, or that we need to recruit more volunteers from the communities most impacted by poor bus services. Finally, we have to confront our internal obstacles. These are things that are within our own movement or organizations that can hold us back or limit our effectiveness. It could be anything from competing priorities or limited capacity to internal conflicts or a lack of strategic alignment. For instance, in our public transportation campaign example, an internal obstacle might be some of our coalition partners are more focused on expanding light rail services, while others are more concerned with improving bus frequency. Or maybe there's a lack of clarity around decision-making processes. That's causing friction amongst our team. The key here is to be honest and proactive in identifying these internal obstacles by naming them and bringing them out into the open. We can work together to find solutions and ensure that we're all moving in the same direction. So when we're filling out this section of your strategy chart, don't hold back. It's important to just put everything out there on the table, take a hard, good look at everything that's going on in your movement, in your organization, and be real about what you've got, what you need, and what you might be getting in your way. By being clear-eyed and strategic about your organizational considerations, you'll be in a better position to build the political power and momentum you need to achieve your goal. And remember, this isn't about pointing fingers or placing blame. It's about coming together as a team to be honest, assess your strengths, your weaknesses, and develop a plan to build your capacity and overcome any obstacles in your way. With a shared commitment to your goal and willingness to do the hard work of self-reflection and growth, there's no limits to what you can achieve. All right, constituents and allies. So let's talk a little bit about the key players in your fight for change. Your constituents, your allies, and your opponents. First, let's focus on your constituents. These are the people who are directly impacted by the issues you're working on, the folks who have the most at stake in the outcome of your campaign. They're the heart and soul of your movement, the reason that you're fighting in the first place. For example, if you're organizing to raise the minimum wage in your city, your constituents would be the low-wage workers who struggle to make ends meet on the current minimum wage. They might be parents working multiple jobs to support their families, or students trying to pay their college while living it on their own. Identifying and engaging your constituents is crucial to building strong, authentic movements for change. These are the people who will be the most passionate advocates, your most dedicated volunteers, and your most powerful spokespersons. They have the lived experience, the moral authority to speak truth to power, and demand change. Next up, let's talk about your allies. These are the individuals, organizations, and institutions that share your values and support your goals. They might not be directly impacted by the issue like your constituents, but they recognize the importance of your fight and are willing to stand with you in solidarity. In our minimum wage example, allies might include progressive faith leaders who believe in economic justice, small business owners who want to support their workers, and advocacy groups focused on reducing poverty and inequality. Building a broad, diverse coalition of allies is key to amplifying your message, increasing your resources, and putting pressure on decision makers from all angles. The more voices you have speaking out in support of your cause, the harder it will be for those in power to ignore you. Now, let's talk about the other side of the equation, your opponents. These are the people and institutions who stand to lose something if you win, or who simply don't agree with your goals. They might be politicians who are beholden to corporate interests, business groups that prioritize profits over people, or individuals who benefit from the status quo. In the fight for a higher minimum wage, opponents might, the opponents might include the Chamber of Commerce, restaurant associations, or conservative lawmakers who argue that raising wages hurt businesses and cost jobs. It's important to know who your opponents are and what motivates them. By understanding their arguments and their tactics, you can develop strategies that counter their influence and persuade them to come to the table by shining a light on their true interests and agendas. You can expose them for who they really are and mobilize public opinions against them. So, as you fill out this section of your strategy chart, take time to really think about those key players. Who are the constituents who can empower them? How can you empower them to lead the way? Who are your potential allies, and how can you bring them into your coalition? And then who are your opponents, and how can you neutralize their influence and make them pay a price for standing in the way of progress? Remember, social change is all about building people power, and that means bringing together everyone who shares your vision for a better world. With a strong base of constituents, a wide circle of allies, and a clear understanding of your opponents, you'll be well on your way to making that vision a reality. All right. Last slide is the tactics. This is fun. So, all right, let's dive into a world of tactics. This is where you get to talk about specific actions and strategies that we can use to build power, pressure decision makers, and win real change in our communities. When it comes to social justice organizing, there are a whole range of tactics that we can draw from. Some are about building our base and shifting public opinion, while others are about directly confronting those in power and forcing them to act. The key is to choose the right tactics for the right moment based on our goals and our resources and other contexts. So, what are some of the most commonly used social justice tactics? There are a few examples here to just get started. So first is direct action. This is about taking bold, visible, and often confrontational action to disrupt business as usual and demand change. Think sit-ins, think boycotts, occupations, and civil disobedience. For example, during the civil rights movement, activists used sit-ins in segregated lunch counters to change and challenge discrimination and force businesses to integrate. Next tactic is community organizing. This is about building relationships, identifying leaders, and mobilizing people to take collective action on the issue that affects them. It often involves going door to door, holding house meetings, forming the neighborhood or issue-based committees. The goal is to build a strong, engaged base of constituents who can advocate for themselves and hold decision makers accountable. Coalition building. This is about bringing together a wide range of groups and individuals who share a common goal, even if they come from different backgrounds or have different priorities. By joining forces, we can pool our resources, amplify our message, and show that our cause has broad, diverse support. For example, the Fight for 15 campaign has brought together labor unions, faith groups, racial justice organizations, and more to demand a living wage for all workers. Media advocacy. This is about using the power of the media to shape public opinion, expose injustice, and pressure decision makers to act. It can involve everything from writing op-eds and letters to the editor, to holding press conferences and rallies, to using social media to spread our message far and wide. The goal is to control the narrative and make our issue impossible to ignore. Lobbying and policy advocacy. This is about directly engaging our decision makers and pushing for specific policy changes. It can involve meeting with elected officials, testifying at hearings, and mobilizing constituents to contact their representatives. The goal is to build relationships with those in power and persuade them to take action on our issues. Now, I know that there will be other workshops diving deeper into the specifics, tactics, like testimony writing and public speaking. Those are definitely important skills to have in our organizing toolkit. Testimony in particular can be a powerful way for us to humanize our issues and to put a face to the statistics. When we share our personal stories and our experience, we can move hearts and minds in a way that that facts and figures can't alone. But the key is to remember that no single tactic is a silver bullet. It takes a combination of different approaches, tailored to specific goals and context, to really build the power we need to win. And it takes sustained efforts over time. We can't just hold one rally or send one email and expect everything to change overnight. So, as we think about the tactics we want to use in our own organizing work, let's keep an open mind and a strategic eye. Let's be creative and bold in our actions, but also thoughtful and intentional in our planning. And most importantly, let's always keep our eye on the prize, the more just and equitable world we know is possible if we're willing to fight for it. The end. And thank you so much for joining me for this workshop on strategy charts, power mapping. This will be uploaded to YouTube, so hopefully you can find this a great use and a great resource for you to share. Please share it far and wide, and I look forward to joining Unite Oregon for in-person training coming up later today.